A lot of Chicago Bears fans want Ryan Poles to trade down from the 10th overall pick in the NFL draft. It's really easy to do in online mock draft simulators, but a lot harder to do in real life, specifically where the Bears are picking this year.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we take a look at what it would take for the Chicago Bears to be able to trade down from the 10th overall pick. Certainly understand why you might want to do it, but it always takes two to execute a trade down. And just because the Bears might want to move down doesn't mean there's going to be a team that wants to move up into the Bears slot. So we'll take a look at what teams could be potential trade up partners, the teams that maybe have some extra draft picks, that ammunition to move up for a trade. And we'll also look at, okay, if teams are going to trade up to the Bears pick, who would they be trading up for? What might be the players that would attract a trade up if they were still on the board when the Chicago Bears are on the clock with the 10th overall pick? Because one of the real challenges here is that when you start to make the case for, well, here's why it would work for the Bears to trade down. Like, this is why the Bears should trade down, because, well, all the players that are going to be available there at 10, they're not much better than the players you could get at 15 or 20. So the Bears should just trade down because the players there are going to be just as good as the players they're getting at 10. So grab some extra draft picks from another team, move on down, and get a player you still really like at the 15th or the 20th pick, or whatever farther down you want to go down. And that all sounds great. But if you're looking at this draft board and saying, there's not really a special player there for me at 10, I can get just as good of a player later on, then why would other teams want to trade up then for a player? If you feel like you can get a good player where they're picking, why would they want to pick where you're picking if you don't want to pick where you're picking? And, sort of the immediate answer to that is like, well, there might be specific players that a team would value more than the Bears would, and so would rather pick that player where the Bears are, where the Bears say, I'm not really that interested in that player anyway, so let a team that wants him more than you move up to get him. And we'll go through what those players might look like a little bit later on in the podcast today. But I can't help but feel like some of the really top options here, that if a really good player from the top 10 falls to the Bears at 10, most of those names that we might talk about in that conversation are players you would just stay at 10 and take. Right? We think about running back Ashton Jeanty could fall to the Bears outside of the top 10, and a team could, of course, be willing to trade up to 10 to get Jeanty, to get a difference-making running back there. But again, that's a player where it's like, I expect him to be taken in the first 9 picks of this draft. It would be a little bit of a surprise if he's still there when the Bears pick at 10. But if he is there at 10, are you even going to trade down at that point? Like, yeah, that's a player teams might want to trade up for, but wouldn't you just want to take him then there? Or same thing is true for either of the top 2 offensive linemen. If Armand Membou from Missouri falls, because Will Campbell's arms at his pro day on Wednesday were 3/8 of an inch longer than they were at the combine, so now all of a sudden he has 33-inch arms, and now that changes his film or whatever, apparently, and now he's a tackle again, even though, again, his arms are the same length as they've always been. The measurements have just come back differently either way. But regardless, like, if somebody's like Membo is there, would a team want to trade up for an offensive tackle prospect? If Will Campbell is there, would teams want to trade up for him if they really like him as a tackle or as a guard or for whatever reason? Like, if one of those great offensive linemen were still there, yeah, I bet plenty of teams would want to trade up for a really good offensive lineman. But again, if you're the Bears and those players are there, then you're not going to want to trade down there in the first place. Like, there has to be this combination of not only a player there that the Bears don't want and that another team will want, but it also has to be then a situation where that team feels the need to have to move up to 10 to get that player, as opposed to waiting where they currently are in the draft order and hoping that player might still land. Like, one of the players that is a little bit tricky there is somebody like, tight end Tyler Warren, who we'll talk about in a little bit here. A player who could be a top 10 pick, could still be there at 10, could be a player that teams want to go after, but like, how many teams really need a tight end and are going to take one in the first round, right? Certainly somebody's going to take Tyler Warren, and he could be gone before the Bears pick at 10. It's not that no one's going to like Tyler Warren. It's that there aren't that many teams that have this big hole at tight end that they'd like to use a first-round pick on. And so if I'm a team that wants to trade up, how many teams, do I feel like I have to move up to get him? Or can I sit there and go, well, there aren't that many teams that want a tight end. And if he's already made it to 10, he may already make it to me in the teens, whatever team you might want to hypothetically want to be here. Like, you have to feel like both, I really want this player, and also I'm scared that this specific player is going to be off the board before I get a chance to take him, right? Like, that encourages maybe the teams that are even farther down, that if there's a player they really feel like is special, to make a big jump up, as opposed to like a team a few picks behind the Bears might not feel like they need to jump a couple spots because the guy they want may just still make it those few spots to get there. But the farther the jump, the more expensive the trade up is. And then teams don't want to have to, leverage their whole draft to move up for one player. If they're having to give away their second round pick and extra picks beyond that to move up 10 spots or more, like, do the Bears want to move down that far? Like, if when we're doing our mock draft simulators, whatever site you use, are you going so even lower than 20? I mean, I think a lot of Bears fans go, from 10 to whatever it might be, 14 or 16 or 18. Like, sure, a handful of spots where you feel like, okay, down at 14 or 16 or 18 or wherever, you can still maybe get a pass rusher you like James Pierce from Tennessee, or Mike Green from Marshall, or Michael Williams from Texas A&M, or an offensive lineman like Kelvin Banks from Texas, potentially. But yeah, there can be some different options in the teens that you would have liked at 10, but you like them even better in the teens, and that's why it's worth trading down. But if you're going to jump to, 22 or 26, all of a sudden, whoa, now you're getting a late first round talent, and you're getting a lot of draft picks, but would the Bears want to trade down that far? Because those would be the teams perhaps feeling more pressure to move up to get that one guy, if there's a guy they just really, really feel like they need to put them over the top. But we don't see those big of jumps nearly as often, unless it's for a truly special blue chip player, usually into the top 5, or at least earlier than 10, into the top 9 of the draft, to go get a Julio Jones type of trade up, a Trey Lance type of trade up, right? That's the kind of move you see up high in the draft, and 10 might not quite be that sweet spot either. So I find myself feeling like it's certainly not out of the question that the Bears could find a trade partner, but I think it's going to be trickier than a mock draft simulator might make it seem like. But I want to go through a few of the teams that might be the best options for a trade partner and what kind of players they might go after in that spot. And then I also want to look at the other way around, the players who might be there at 10 and what teams might be willing to trade up for them to where the Bears are picking next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I have the Gametime app on my phone, and I love it. I've used it multiple times to go to Bears games, to go to concerts, comedy shows, theater events, you name it all. They've got it on Gametime. There's something about watching entertainment live, feeling the energy of the crowd, witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing it in person, and getting tickets to those events shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in. They make it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Their Gametime Picks feature curates all of the different ticket deals, so you're seeing the best value and the best price for the best seats available in the Gametime app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's promo code LOCKED on NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Bears don't have a lot of clear and obvious trade partners available, but there's a few teams that stand out as who might be most likely to want to move up, that you feel like maybe have some, I don't want to say desperation, but they have the ammunition to do so. And this is not a team that's lingering on the edge of well, they don't have much to play for anyway. So what's the point? Can they go get a player to really be a difference maker for them and put them over the top? Because there are some teams that just don't have very many draft picks at all. And it's well, they're definitely not going to trade up. I think about the Minnesota Vikings, right? For example, they're at 24. It's probably farther than the Bears want to go down. The Vikings have a first-round pick, a third-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. They do not have enough picks this year to move up to where the Bears are. They could, of course, trade away future draft picks or whatever and enough capital. You can find ways to make a deal work if you're really desperate to make a deal, but less likely that those teams that already don't have very many picks are going to give up even more picks to move up higher in the draft. I think the Atlanta Falcons are another team that's in this same conversation of never say never. They could give up future picks and make sure they go get their guy, but the Falcons have a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and then a fourth-round pick, and then they don't pick again until the seventh round. So 1, 2, 4, 7, 7 is their entire draft class right now. It reminds me of where the Bears were last year. It was they had 2 first-round picks and then the third-round pick, and then what do they have, a fourth-round pick that they traded? The Bears had 4 picks last season. They weren't in a great spot to trade up until they got back into the fifth round when they traded a future fourth to get Austin Booker, but it was a small draft class. Teams with not very many picks aren't as inclined to move up. Whereas if I'm a team that has a bunch of extra draft picks anyway, I might not even have room for 10 rookies on my 53-man roster, so I don't need to use all those picks, and I should trade some of them away to move up or to trade them into future drafts. And there's 3 teams in particular within reasonable range of the Chicago Bears, and really only 3 teams after the Bears at all that have good ammunition in a way, good extra ammunition in a way that would make a lot of sense for trading up. I'll throw in one other team beyond these 3, but there's 3 main best options here. It's the San Francisco 49ers, who pick right after the Bears at 11, so wouldn't be much of a trade down, but we've seen the Bears do 1-pick trades before. It's the Miami Dolphins at 13, and it's the Seattle Seahawks at 18. Those 3 are the 3 teams that have more notable draft pick ammunition to trade than pretty much any of the other teams in the teens or the 20s of the draft. You could throw in the Buffalo Bills all the way down at 30. They've got 2 second-round picks and 2 fourth-round picks and 3 fifth-round picks. They've got some extra draft picks in there. If they wanted to move up from 30 to 10 would be a huge trade. It'd probably, again, they'd have to use a future first-round pick, and it just doesn't seem super likely there. But the 49ers, the Dolphins, and the Seahawks all are right in that sweet spot of they pick close enough to the Bears where they could afford to move up, and they have some extra picks that could make it easy to move up. Obviously, the 49ers being 1 pick after the Bears is reminiscent of 2 years ago in the draft when the Bears were they at 9 or 10 and they moved down 1 spot with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles take Jalen Carter. The Bears take Darnell Wright. I think the Bears were at 9, traded down to 10, took Wright at 10. Eagles moved 1 spot to secure the rights to take Jalen Carter and gave up, I believe, was it a future fourth-round pick or a current? I think it was a current fourth-round pick at the time to make that 1 spot jump. I don't know that there's a Jalen Carter type prospect for the 49ers there. The only possibility there for me would be if one of those offensive linemen was there, is Will Campbell or Armand Membo, or maybe both of them are there when the Bears pick at 10 and the 49ers really want to get one of those offensive linemen and pick their choice of those offensive linemen. So they give you a 4th-round pick or whatever, maybe their extra 4th-round pick to move 1 spot to swap with you. Or, is there a possibility here where Ashton Genty is on the board at 10 and Bears fans are screaming at their television, take the Boise State running back, just like Bears fans were screaming at their television, take Jalen Carter, and the Bears move one spot with the 49ers, the 49ers take Ashton Genty and the Bears take someone else at 11. Like those are the kinds of scenarios that would make sense to me, because otherwise, why bother swapping one pick with the Bears, right? Like, unless it's a player that the Bears might also want there. But like, I'm not sure the 49ers and Bears are going to swap one spot for a cornerback, because the 49ers aren't going to sit there and think the Bears are going to take a corner. So let the Bears pick and just get your guy at 11, right? So that's the kind of scenario where it would have to be a player that you think the Bears would like, and then the Bears would choose to pass on him anyway. And that feels less likely in this class, where there's not a player quite like Carter. Like, okay, like if Mason Graham from Michigan falls, well, take him at 10. Like, why are you trading with the 49ers to pass up a player like that? Like, no one quite fits that category for the Bears and the 49ers specifically in this draft class. There's no one for the 49ers to really jump ahead of there other than the Bears. It opens up a little bit more with the Miami Dolphins with the 13th overall pick. And they only have an extra 4th and 5th, so it's not like that's great ammunition, but at least it's extra ammunition. If they say they give up their, I don't know, their 3rd round pick to go from 13 to 10, it's not cheap, but then, okay, at least you have 2 extra 4ths, or like 2 4ths and 2 5ths to fill out the rest of your draft class. Or maybe they give you a 4th and a 5th to move up from 13. Like, whatever the math ends up negotiating out at. Like, that's a spot where, okay, like the Dolphins could use a corner, and if somebody like, Will Johnson from Michigan is still available, or Jahdae Barron from Texas, or if there's a corner that they like specifically, maybe they look at this and say, hey, the 49ers might take a corner at 11. The Cowboys could be in the market for a corner at 12, and we need to jump those 2 guys to get to 10 to get the cornerback that we just feel like we absolutely need. I could see the Dolphins as a potential landing spot for Penn State tight end Tyler Warren as well, and say, hey, we got to get this tight end to unlock this offense to, try and get more out of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and tight ends. They got Jonas Smith, and I think he's been fine, but I don't know that that's keeping you from someone like Tyler Warren, and can be really something that unlocks the offense for a guy like Mike McDaniels, who comes from the 49ers tree and is used to having, a George Kittle type player. But I don't know that the Dolphins would feel like they have to get to 10 to get Tyler Warren, because I don't think the 49ers are going to take Tyler Warren when they have George Kittle still. He's 31. He's not young, but he's not old. He's not that old either. George Kittle still has some years left on him. And the Dallas Cowboys have Jake Ferguson, and they used a 2nd round pick a couple years ago on Luke Schoonmaker. I don't know how to pronounce his name, from Michigan. Like, they've used draft picks on tight ends. They're pretty fine at tight end. So, like, if I'm the Dolphins and Tyler Warren's there, why do I got to trade up? Because he's not going to go 11 or 12 unless somebody else traded up to get past the Dolphins. But that's really hard to predict. So, like, Miami makes sense, but I'm not sure exactly, other than a corner, what else they trade up for. Seattle's the one that's maybe the most intriguing for me, to go from 10 to 18. They have an extra 2nd round pick, an extra 3rd round pick, and an extra 5th round pick. And Seattle's a team where it's like, maybe if wide receiver Ted Arroyo McMillan from Arizona's number 1 wide receiver on the draft board is still there at 10, and the Seahawks feel like, okay, we got to get past, the Cowboys and a bunch of other teams in there that might want the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. They just really think he is a special guy for their offense to help Sam Darnold, to replace DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, to go with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, that could make sense there. They're also a team that could use a corner at 18, and if they really love Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron or whoever, like, that could be a team that jumps up there. But I think for a team like the Seahawks at 18, they kind of have to ask themselves, like, okay, there is more than one good wide receiver and more than one good cornerback in this draft class. And so the question is, do I, as the Seattle Seahawks, have to trade to 10 to get the number 1 wide receiver or corner in this draft class? Or am I perfectly happy staying at 18 or just going less high than 10 to still get a wide receiver or corner, but just maybe not the number 1 guy? But some teams really like Luther Burden from Missouri or Matthew Golden from Texas. Could be guys that are, mid 1st round picks there that are not Ted McMillan, but could be in that conversation. Or same thing at corner, like, okay, you don't get Will Johnson, but could you get Jahdae Barron there, or Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky could sneak into the 1st round in this range? Like, how much do they have to have the number 1 guy at that spot? It's not like, oh, there's only one, like Tyler Warren, there's one I guess there's 2 1st round tight ends, but like there's a tight end who's clearly above everyone else. And so if you don't get him, there's this big drop off. But maybe there's not as big of a drop-off at corner and wide receiver, and if there's not as big of a drop-off, then you're not as desperate to trade up, and that's where it gets hard to find a trade partner that has these kind of extra draft picks to move up for. That being said, a team doesn't have to have extra draft picks to move up. They just have to want the right player and be willing to give up picks to go get him. So we'll look at some of the key players that could be worth trading up for to 10 and what teams might be interested in moving to 10 where the Bears are picking to get that specific player next on Locked On Bears. When you first think about this draft class, like we talked about at the top, it's like there's sort of this feeling, right, among Bears fans and other teams and draft analysts, like the difference between the player you get at 10 and the player you get at 20 probably won't be that big of a difference. Like there's 3 or 4 different pass rushers that could all kind of go in that range. There's a few offensive linemen that could go in that range, a few corners that could go in that range, a few wide receivers that could go in that range. And okay, maybe the difference between making sure you get the number 1 guy versus the number 2 guy or the number 2 guy versus the number 3 guy isn't that big of a difference. But I do think there are a few players here that the right team could covet and say, hey, we got to make sure we go get this one guy because we like him specifically so much better than a lot of our other options at the position. I think when we talk about trading up and down in the draft, we always have to start with the quarterback conversation. That if, say Cam Ward goes 1 to the Titans as expected, say for some reason Shedeur Sanders from Colorado falls and is still on the clock or still on the board when the Bears are on the clock with the 10th overall pick, right? Is there a team that wants to trade up to get their quarterback of the future and make sure that they secure them? And certainly like on paper, you're like, well, yeah, shouldn't somebody want to trade up for a quarterback? But the question is sort of like who and why number 10? Because I think when we think about the teams, like if you're trading up for Shedeur Sanders, it's right because you want to make sure that you get him and that no one else takes him before you get the chance to take him. But if he makes it all the way to 10, that means he's made it past the Browns at 2, the Giants at 3, the Raiders at 6, maybe the Jets at 7, and the Panthers at 9 as far as teams that could all be, the Saints at 9. The Panthers are at 8, the Saints at 9. So Giants, Raiders, Jets, Saints are all teams that could be in the quarterback market conversation there. If he makes it to 10 and has already gotten past all of those teams, who are you trading up to beat the punch to get Shedeur Sanders? Like Dallas at 12, maybe? People have thrown out the Colts as a sneaky potential quarterback team. Maybe the Seahawks at 18. They just signed Sam Darnold, but could they draft a quarterback? Like, I guess there. Or then Pittsburgh at 21. Like, who's trading up to specifically saying, I got to get him at 10 or else I'm going to miss him there? Like, do you got to get past Dallas? Do you have to get past Indianapolis? Like, are those teams going to take Shedeur Sanders in the first round? Or if you're Pittsburgh, for example, let's stick with them for a second, hypothetically, and you really want Shedeur Sanders, do you got to get to 10 to get him? Or you say, Dallas isn't taking him. Colts aren't taking him. Well, Seattle's not taking him. We'll just wait at 22 and get him. Like, that's where, if he's already, like, your real threats are 6 and 9, like the Raiders and the Saints. Like, those are the teams that might be more likely to steal a quarterback. But if he's already got it to 10, it's a lot harder to feel like, man, a team's really got to make sure they go up for Shedeur Sanders. Or, say Shedeur Sanders goes number 2 or 3 to the Browns or the Giants. Like, could a team want to move up for Jackson Dart as the 3rd quarterback taken in the first round? Again, probably not, but never say never here. Like, I think the strongest, the 2 strongest individual arguments for a player that team would want to trade up to 10 for is wide receiver to Troy McMillan from Arizona, and then your number 1 cornerback, whether that's Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron. Like, those are the 2 spots where it's like somebody's going to take, if the number 1 wide receiver in this draft and the number 1 corner in this draft are both still on the board at 10, somebody is going to take those players soon after the Bears pick. It might not be right away at 11, but like Dallas at 12 could take either of those players. A team like Arizona at 16, Seattle at 18, like those players could be quick to come off in the teens. And if I'm a team that says, I think McMillan is the number 1 wide receiver in this draft and way better than all the other wide receivers, and I need to get him to give me that 1 wide receiver to put my offense over the top, to make sure I get past the 49ers and the Cowboys and the Cardinals and the Seahawks that all might want these wide receivers, right? Like, I got to go get him. That's a player that could make sense to me. Same thing with Will Johnson or Jade Barron, whoever your number one corner. Like, he could go to the Dolphins at 14. He could go to the Falcons at 15. Seahawks at 18. The Buccaneers at 19. Like, those all make sense as cornerback teams that you would want to trade up to get past to make sure you get them. Now, doesn't mean you have to go up to 10. If you don't think the 49ers are going to take him at 11, you certainly don't think the Bears are going to take him at 10. So you could wait and trade up to 11 if the 49ers don't really want him, or if the Cowboys don't really want him at 12. Could you trade up there? Like, it's not as though 10 is the only spot you can necessarily get this guy unless you really think the 49ers are the threat to take that player. But the 49ers really need like O-line, D-line, running back, and maybe corner is kind of the one spot where you got to get past the 49ers, and that's where it feels most likely to me. The other player I'll throw in is kind of a unique set of circumstances where only some teams are really going to go hard after this player, and other teams, like the Bears, won't really be interested because they just don't fit the way they operate their team, and that's Jalen Walker, the hybrid linebacker / edge rusher from Georgia. He's just not a scheme fit for every team. He's not a scheme fit for the Bears. He's like too small to play defensive end, but more of a pass rusher. And so kind of going to play linebacker, but his best role is rushing the passer. And so you kind of have to have like a 3-4 edge rusher team, or a team that can get really creative with him. Like, I think teams like the Falcons at 15 or the Cardinals at 16 or maybe the Buccaneers at 19 would make a lot of sense as Jalen Walker teams. If Walker gets out of the top 9 to the Bears at 10, could a team like Arizona trade up for him? Could a team like Tampa Bay trade up for him? Like, the problem is, like, again, like, is 10 the spot you got to get him? Do you think the 49ers are going to take a player like Jalen Walker? I'm not sure that it's a perfect fit for them in that 4-3. They could use a pass rusher, but I don't think he can play full-time defensive end, and they got linebacker talent in San Francisco. So maybe you don't need to go all the way to 10. But then, like, Dallas at 12 with Matt Eberflus's defense, I don't think Jalen Walker is a fit in Matt Eberflus's defense either, so you don't really need to get to 11. So, like, it becomes hard. Like, yeah, you want to trade up for this player, but you don't have to trade up to 10 there. We could throw in the tight end Tyler Warren. We talked about him as a potential pick for the Dolphins. Like, if the Colts could use a tight end at 14, the Dolphins are at 13, so if the Colts want to jump the Dolphins at 13 and get Warren, but you don't have to go to 10 because the 49ers don't need a tight end and the Cowboys don't need a tight end. So you could really trade up from 14 to 12, one spot over the Dolphins to get that tight end. Or the Chargers at 22 could be a team that could use a tight end to unlock that offense a little bit more for Justin Herbert. But again, 10, that the Bears are in a hard spot here, right? A hard spot to trade down from as far as prospects that teams want to trade up for, and also 10 being the spot that teams would have to trade to in order to still land that prospect. I think it's a lot easier to trade down. I think the Cowboys are in a pretty sweet spot there at 12 of, like, players are going to be there and there's teams who want to get past at 13, 14, and 15. Like, I think the Bears at 10 and the 49ers at 11 might have some more trouble trading down. But once you get to 12, 13, that's where I think it opens up a little bit more because of the needs of the other teams picking in that range and the need to get past them in order to pick your player. And 10 might just be higher than a lot of these teams need to trade. So I am not counting on the Bears having a really good trade partner and really good trade opportunity. Never put it past Ryan Poles to find one. He found one for the Darnell Wright, Jalen Carter trade that I wasn't necessarily expecting to happen either. But it's really easy to hope for and really easy to plug into a mock draft simulator and make a trade when it might not be actually that realistic for the Chicago Bears. We'll see exactly what happens here. We certainly... we're doing a mock draft for the Lockdown Podcast Network, and I had some trade conversations, but nothing really matriculated there in our mock draft. So I ended up staying at the 10th pick and taking a player. I was very, very happy that still made it to the 10th pick. That'll be coming out in the coming weeks here on the Locked On Bears podcast and across the Locked On Podcast Network. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can always check out Locked On NFL for more football content for your second listen, or Locked On NFL Draft for more draft talk. But just make sure you come on back to Locked On Bears tomorrow and every day for another opportunity to bear down.